did work for me. Thank you. I think until Aleda gets back, I'll try to just do double duty and take adequate notes for her. Don't want to hold everyone up since we're starting late. We're going to go ahead and try to move this pretty quickly and try not to keep you all here too late. So I'm going to call to order the meeting of the City of Albany Traffic and Safety Commission for April 24th, 2014. And roll call, we are all here. So to make it easy.
Present.
Commissioner Napokrowski.
Here.
Commissioner McQuaid.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Reeves.
Here.
Chair Frederick Cavanaugh.
Present. Thank you. So the approval of the minutes for March 27th, if people have had a chance to review them and would like to comment or approve them, we can do that. Alternately, there's nothing wrong with waiting until next month if you want more time to be able to do that. So either option is available to us. Comments?
I'm ready to approve, comment and approve now.
Okay, very good.
Anyone else?
All right. So your comments?
Just two small things. On page 2, the comments about Jackson Street, I think would be a little clearer if we separated the section between Buchanan and Solano where there was not much space for the bike lane, and then another separate comment about 8th Street in Berkeley, which is a very different situation. And I think if you just annotate those sentences with what section of Jackson they're talking about, that would clarify. Okay. And on page 3, there's a reference to AS and S that I presume means AS and R.
I know. Okay, great. I'll make a note of that.
Very good. So with those corrections, would you like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
Very well. I'll second. We have a second. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Abstentions? Seeing none, so that's unanimously approved. Okay. And, public comment, actually. I was just
I do have
making notes here.
a comment that was sent to me via email.
Okay.
I'm gonna read it if you-
Very good. Sure.
It's from Sonny Lorenzoni. He's the owner of Genius, and he is writing to request this. I'm writing this letter for review at the City Hall meeting, Traffic and Safety Commission on Thursday to request a 10-minute pickup, takeout parking space in front of my restaurant, 1556 Solano Avenue. We have been part of Solano for 17 years, and I feel this space will contribute to the avenue tremendously. Thank you for your time and consideration. Jenny Mansoni, owner, Genie Restaurant.
Okay. Perhaps that's something we can add to our future agenda.
That's what I told him.
Very good. Thank you. Any comments from members of the public who are here tonight? Anna?
Good evening, Commissioners. Nick Pilch, Albany residents. Number one, I'd like to remind you about Bike Month, May. Bike to Work Day is coming May 8th, and you can get other information about that and Albany Arts and Green Festival and the Bike Rodeo at albanystrollworld.org. I'm the co-founder of Albany Strollers and Rollers, and my statement does not represent a formal position by this group, although it is the opinion of many of its core members. I'm here to talk to you about the accident of January 21st, 2014 at Masonic in Solano, where a girl was run over by a car and her leg fractured because the driver failed to yield to this girl in a crosswalk. I know you've discussed this at previous meetings as well, at which I was not present. The police report puts the driver at fault and states that the driver violated the vehicle code. Furthermore, as you know, the report recommends no action. No citation was issued. I believe this is wrong. Joe Matera, the father of the girl, came to speak to you at the last meeting and also stated this was wrong and, quote, there needs to be a consequence, unquote. The vast majority of comments about this on the Albany Patch article agree with this point of view as well. This has really hit a nerve in the community. The police spoke at the last meeting about this. I was not able to watch the video, so what I understand is that they stated that their policy was not necessarily to cite in the case of accidental, no ill will involved violation of the vehicle code. I think this is really unfortunate if this is indeed their policy and it is wrong-headed. And it leads to some of the poor driving that you see and people complain about on our streets every day. And was this really an accident? While I'm certain the driver had no ill intentions, at the very least, the driver lacked the required amount of attention to the dynamics of the street. The driver failed to yield. The driver failed to do her duty as a driver. The Albany police are not alone in this thinking about how to use the vehicle code. Penalties for drivers who injure and kill pedestrians and cyclists are often laughable. The news is full of drivers who get away with almost nothing due to their poor driving or lack of attention. One of the former heads of the East Bay Bicycle Coalition used to say, if you want to kill someone, a good way to do it is with a car, as long as you make it look like an accident. I remember being taught when I learned to drive that driving was a privilege, not a right. That's why you get a license, you take a test, and you prove yourself. In my opinion, this privilege comes with the responsibility to be cited when violating the vehicle code. This is only fair. Why would we cite some people and not others? This would set a bad precedent of favoring some arbitrarily. And I believe that such enforcement will result in safer roads for all. I believe getting behind the wheel gives you a great responsibility to be careful, to be watchful, and exercise all due caution when driving your car. Enforcing the law, enforcing citations will exact a penalty that will cause drivers to consider how they drive and cause them to drive more carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
I'm Jackie Armstrong, and I live at 759 Pierce Street. And I became aware by watching the council that Pierce Street Park apparently has to reduce spending. My concern is that on Pierce Street, traffic is really very serious and that people drive very fast. In fact, we have a neighbor that tested and found out that some cars were going 45 miles an hour in this stretch. So my concern is the crosswalk, that if they're going to cut expenses, do not cut any expenses in regarding to the crosswalk. We're hoping to have this flashing beacon to alert people of the crosswalk, and there'll be children and mothers, fathers, grandparents, and all my neighbors will be crossing. And today, to cross Pierce Street, you must be very, very careful. We don't have any designated crosswalks. We have the corners, and other than that, if you're in the middle of the block, you cross. You have to be very, very careful, and you have to look both ways, and you're walking between cars. So I always wanted speed bumps on Pierce Street too, but similar maybe to what's at the end of where the high-rise are on Pierce Street. And that's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I can provide a little bit of information.
Sure.
On the speed humps, you're going to have a raised crosswalk at the entrance of the park, which is actually similar to a speed hump.
Oh, okay, so the crosswalk.
By where the flashing beacons were
With the
proposed?
flashing beacons will be a raised crosswalk like they have in front of the high-rise.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that.
A little bit more,
I think the flashing is really good too, to draw your attention.
Right, you have to make sure that the people who are adjacent to the flashing beacons are okay with the flashing beacon. Because it's going to be flashing all the time.
All the time.
That's basically our concern too.
Oh.
Right. Very
You
good.
mean whether cars are driving down the street or not?
Whether pedestrians are passing
Crossing.
or crossing or not.
But when a car approaches, it flashes.
Well, it's a different technology. This is a flashing beacon that is solar. What we're considering is a solar flashing
okay.
beacon that will be flashing all the time.
All the time. I think that sounds good.
Okay.
That gets people's attention, and they need to pay attention if they're approaching a crosswalk.
Okay,
Oh.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Great. Commission members, my name is Bob Otis. I've lived in Albany for 30-plus years, not quite as long as Peggy McQuaid, but a while. And I've had an office on Solano since January of 1984, and I've lived within walking distance of my office for all but 2 of those 30 years. So I spend a fair amount of time there, and at the risk of annoying my good friend Nick Pilch and his colleagues from Strollers and Rollers, I am concerned about the attractive nuisance element of the bike racks that exist on Solano. I see it as a parent, I think of it as a parent. I experienced it not long ago as a grandparent walking my two of my 4 young granddaughters around. And I, of course, am not a professional risk management person, but I wonder whether there has been any assessment of the risk aspect of having little kids climb on those bike racks. And I see it happening all the time, sometimes with attentive parents who are not going to let their kids fall off the bikes, but not always. And in fact, I've seen some incidents where I thought it was clearly not happening. And I think there is a substantial risk that someday some kid is going to see that, as my granddaughter did the other day, want to run toward it, get ahead of a parent, climb on it, thinking that silhouette of a seat is actually a seat, injuring a groin, screaming and falling on their head. I expressed this sentiment to the former city manager about a year ago, and nothing happened, but I just wanted to raise it again. And as I said, I'm not a risk manager, and not in a position to say whether it is or not a serious risk, but I think that some professional ought to look at that question, because I think they truly are problematic and that there will be an injury. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Any other speakers tonight on this? Okay. Then we'll move to our next item, number 5, which is presentation from the police, our police report.
There will not be
I
a
have none.
report tonight
Okay.
because of the change in time, so they're going to
Gotcha.
report on 2 months in the next coming.
Okay, very well. Then we'll hold that for next month. So that takes us to item 6A, which is the City CarShare presentation, requesting designation of some on-street parking at or near the commercial district as point of delivery or pod.
Yeah, I prepared a short memorandum, basically giving you a little background on the history of this request. Starting in January 2014, we discussed it at this commission, and at the time we had a series of questions regarding the type of what is the purpose of the on-street parking. We also say that we would like to hear from staff from City CarShare, a presentation in their experiences in other cities, and we have invited Mr. O'Brien, yeah. I'm sorry, to actually give us a presentation.
See if it works here. Alita, I just want to check in. We're not discussing specific locations this evening?
We have the locations that is basically the same locations that they requested since the beginning, which is, in a memorandum, it says Solano Avenue in Curtis, Solano Avenue near Ohlone Greenway, Solano Avenue in San Pablo Avenue, San Pablo Avenue in Marine Avenue.
So if we're going to be discussing those, I need to recuse myself.
Oh, well, maybe you want to, okay.
Can I
yeah,
stay for
that's
the
fine.
presentation?
You can stay from the
and then-
presentation. For the
then
discussion, you
say-
can recuse
Yeah.
yourself.
I hadn't
I hadn't been prepared to discuss any particular locations.
Just a
what our
general
discussions have
presentation, okay.
So I'll get started. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brent O'Brien. I'm the Member Experience Director for City CarShare. I've been with them for about 8 years, and I just wanted to walk you through sort of where our discussions have gone with the City of Albany. And I understand the Commission would like to hear about possible on-street, what are some of the challenges that we've faced in the past, that sort of thing. So I'll start out with a bit of a commercial for City CarShare. Let you know we started in 2001. We're the local nonprofit car sharing organization. We pioneered car sharing in the Bay Area. We started with 5 locations, 15 cars in and around the city of San Francisco. Fast forward to today, and we have 400 at about 250 locations. So we're the small guy, but we're growing. We still continue to grow. We're the most affordable. We're the greenest. Our fleet has over 50% hybrid plug-in or PHEV vehicles. So that's something that's very important to us as a mission-based company. And we focus a lot on community-based car sharing and social goals. So what does that mean? That means we invest our money, put it back into the community in places such as low-income housing, low-income programs, and accessible equipment. We're the only car share provider in the nation that has accessible vans for folks in wheelchairs or mobility devices. We have 4 of them at this time. Some questions came in our discussions with the City of Albany is why hasn't City CarShare gone big into Albany at this point? You've been around for 12 years. Are you desiring to come into Albany? Is Albany a good fit? I just want to back up and say where car sharing works and has historically worked, as you all probably imagine, is high-dense urban environments with extreme parking demand and where there's good access to transit so that people can feel confident about giving up their cars. So to this point, there hasn't really been, until about 4 years ago, we started discussions with Albany, a huge demand to come out here. We did in 2008 go to University Village, which is this way, about a mile, that way, about a mile, thanks. And that really serves the housing needs of the graduate students over there. We have 2 cars there. They get fairly decent use, about 50 reservations per month, which is something that is sustainable for us. About 160 members of City CarShare in all of Albany, and they're not really concentrated, other than in that particular area. There's not 160 of them there, but about 50 of them live right there in that village and keep those cars moving. The opportunities that we've discussed, although we've laid out some streets here, we haven't finalized anything, but they have been in the past things like fleet replacement programs. We've done that with the City of Berkeley since 2004 to help them reduce their fleet maintenance and otherwise costs. We've also discussed a possible location at the Pierce Street high-rises, just never materialized, and some of these streets as well, mainly up and down Solano. And we need a lot of outreach and support from the city, from HOAs if we go into developments, and certainly from the small business community. Sometimes we talk about minimum use guarantees. We've had invites from other cities. If the car doesn't make a certain allocated to help support them for a period of time, maybe 2-3 years. We haven't talked about this with Albany yet, but we may. And then parking. Parking is really important. Again, visibility of parking is a key for cars. Like San Francisco, there's not much street parking in terms of surface lots. We can go down into garages and that sort of thing because, well, there's a lot of people in those developments, so it works a little bit better there, but we're still clamoring every day for sort of highly visible spots to make its bank. It was my understanding that the commission wanted to understand from us what our challenges have been on street. We've had 2, we're working on 3 major programs. One of the started in Oakland in 2004. not all at once, but eventually got through 2006 up to 6 location, 8 cars. Those are located, 4 of them are located right downtown next to the plaza at City. We have one at Adams Point, one on Bridge, and they all do fairly well. An on-street car will do about 20 to 30% better than a car that's garage. Again, I would call it a demonstration. I'm going to pilot at that time where City CarShare worked with the sort of to the west in the Sunset and the Rich garages out there. A lot less demand on. It was a good test. We were able to see how quickly we could gain traction. It took us about a year effort. We went to each neighborhood, community groups, business. You really needed to get in front of them to talk to them. We were actually part of the solution. We were able to do that for that 11 that news in the last couple of weeks. Just us that are going to be participating. It's also Ava Zipcar and a company called Get Around, which is the peer-to-peer provider. So we're getting a little bit nervous about giving away 450 of them. And I can, in front of people's businesses, become very, very. What we're in the process of doing now is a bunch of outreach, and we're going to convince them that for each car that we put on this road, study after study says we'll take 10 off. And that's really where the city is going. Talked with the City of Albany. We've thought that in order to gain traction quickly and to get higher usage, rather than to put them on surface lots tucked away somewhere, it would be on street. But that's not a requirement. It's just what we thought was a good idea. And I think one of the city planners thought it was too. So that's why I'm here tonight. We've just been working with the city planning department. I'm sorry. Planning.
So when you talk about a district where a lot of people versus a dense residential development.
We just put a car in Elmwood, for instance, in the city lot right behind sort of that commercial district right there. We were trying to get on street, but we couldn't convince the city to do that at that point. So we made an agreement that we would go behind the lot. We'd restripe the lot. We'd make one more too well in hugely industrial areas.
What kind of usage pattern do you envision that would make it, destination, but why would somebody want to pick up a car from the,
Yeah, so people can walk, take bus, district. If they find there's some items that they like and they want to take home, it's easy to use a car share vehicle.
for that second half of the shopping trip?
Could be the second half of that shopping trip, right? The mile home and the mile back, that sort of thing. But a lot of the small businesses where we do this have joined as well. So them and their employees join, become CarShare members, and then they don't have to drive in and take up those crucial spaces to work. They can use public transit if that works better for them, and if they need to. Unless it's very small.
Turkey.
Okay.
And okay, so I have to get my turkey home.
Mm-hmm.
How do I understand how this works?
Yeah, okay, so let's back up. So you join a car sharing organization, ours or others, and you become a member. You go online, you fill out an app reservation by going online or on an app on your phone, and you can make that reservation, in our case, from 15 minutes to 3 days later. You just, that's it. Is this all right? Well, that's what you use. It lets you in the car. Keys in the car. You use the car. Bring it back. Use that key to lock the car. It also disables the engine, and then you go about your merry way.
The street, so hopefully still visible.
Yeah, they're our best. They're our best. Unless there's an on-street spot.
Gotcha.
Highly dense neighborhoods, because you can sort of centralize through the walk and and in our cases where we've done on-street, they're only allowing generally can't support a huge neighborhood with a huge demand. So we still need surface lots in other places. So the surface lots are becoming, so we're being forced on the ground in a lot of places.
Gotcha.
Team the funding in case it doesn't?
See Berkeley, for instance, like that at one of their offsite locations. Been in discussions with other cities. Your car, let's say it's $1,200 to $1,400, will make up the difference. So they use it, the community uses it, the business uses it. We look at that revenue at the end of the month or at the end of 6 months, and maybe we have a shortfall of this. They get funds allocated to make up the difference for us, to keep the program going for a certain period of time. It's not forever, it's usually for a couple of years, because we're fairly confident if we can get traction over $100 a car per month.
Per month, okay.
Anywhere from 40 to 60 reservations a month.
The city was offering to,
We've time-based and arranged them, and there will be a cap on whatever have to pay. We know what we need to make. We come to an agreement. We say, okay, $1,200 a month, let's say. And they agree. They get a general fund. Generally, the city council, we haven't had to do it too often, actually. So it's only in a couple of cases we've had to do it.
and to follow up on Peggy's question about, or was it Peggy or Susan talking?
It's just a conversation, and we try to show up and be as transparent as possible, and we try to refer them to the data that exists out there, which around, these two spots, ruining my entire business. It's generally. I had an interaction last week for this new pilot where it was right in front of a pizza shop. So when we went out there to do the outreach, to shake their hands, to say what we were doing, he's like, no way, it's not going to happen. I will fight this tooth and nail. But he said, how about you go down the block about 70 feet, there's a school, and then there's kind of a, we said, great. And so that's what you have to be able to work with. We haven't had a lot of problems with residents, because they see it, I think, generally as a benefit.
So if it's on street and
Allow day-long or reservations. It's only hourly. So on
Okay.
street, we're looking at hopefully 1 to 3 reservations a day. So
okay,
creating a mini one. We found that the most successful pods were getting somewhere between 30 and 45 unique reservers. That means in our best area, they were all in cars.
mm-hmm.
There'd be no place to park either.
Hybrid cars or electric cars? Is
I
that-
would love you to. This is one of our chief concerns with the. No, they know this, and we've pushed back on Director Reskin and everything else. They weren't tough enough. We wanted them to raise the bar. So to your point, we would love them to say all of them have to be PZEVs or zero-emission vehicles, elevating it and giving a benefit to the environment and the community by doing it.
Just to be clear, are you suggesting that
That's part of our activist roots, that we have to do that.
Okay. Come up and comment. Give each person up to 3 minutes to give us their comment. We may yet have more questions, but we'll invite you back up for those if we need to.
Okay.
So, any speakers? This is to
Because,
Yeah,
one of the
in the previous
questions, yeah.
discussion.
As long as we don't mention the, if we can start actually right now just with general discussions, it's fine, and I can call back, Kim back.
I would like to hear
Okay.
We'll speak on general principles of the idea of having on-street car share or other. One would be what interest in having on-street car share, because certainly if it was off-street, the city would not necessarily have to be involved if, for example, it were in the safe facilities. Is it something that the commissioners are generally? Okay.
I did receive from an attorney in January, or the second time that we discussed this, frankly opposing the idea.
It seems like there are benefits for car sharing in general to have it located in the most next step in.
Keep thinking about this. I do, somewhere in discussion broader than maybe one vendor. But I keep going back to, like, Safeway as being a location for the provider to talk to them, not for us to be involved in it, but it just seems like a good idea. And I'd also, doing this basically is to be as successful as we can.
The sprouts.
Is that very close to where the existing City CarShare pod is?
So that's pretty close. 2 blocks away is,
Too close.
yeah, well, you're functionally drawing from the same market. Okay.
I don't know.
And you don't want to carry them home walking, so you check out a car. But,
There's Vevmo too, Vevmo.
yeah. But if you know, they're visible from the,
Yeah, I think any place where there's one destination, it's for us to bow out and let the car.
Pierce Street, though, it seems like it's a highly populated area that it might be a really good place, and that would be on the street, I would assume.
yeah, let's stay away from specific locations for now.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I know, it's too easy. Okay. Staying open to any vendor, not just CarShare, though clearly will generation.
Exactly.
All of the other ones are profit generated. Like Zipcar is for profit.
Right. So,
I have a question about the guarantee. Can I ask?
In credit towards.
The
Later,
area?
can I just ask you to look at the proximity map and reassure me that I should stay for this? It looks to me like I'm outside, like this is outside my circle, but last time you had a different interpretation than I did.
It is outside our circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Always good to check.
right.
We also have received letters actually opposing this proposal, and there are some suggestions in the letters too that they, for instance, they suggest to install signage saying that on a day of the waste management garbage collection, they shouldn't be parked on each X or Y side of the street, and provide some enforcement. That's one of the solutions. Also, the residents said that in the past, about 10 years ago, they had to go through the same exercise. Waste Management was requesting red curbs. They were painted, and they actually wonder what's going on right now. That they wonder if Waste Management has newer trucks that are larger and that they cannot fit. And also, they sent me, some residents sent me a video that actually shows the different types of trucks that Waste Management has. So, and then they wonder why they have not assigned smaller trucks in Albany, especially because of the density and the narrowness of the street. We do have staff from Waste Management, and I would like to invite you to make a presentation on your needs and why you are requesting. Basically, I don't know if I cover all your.
Hello, my name is Cody Lowe. I'm a route manager for waste management for Albany and Emeryville. Basically, I understand how difficult parking is in the city of Albany. I deal with it every single day, and there's not many instances where I can be proactive. A lot of my job is being reactive, whether it be dealing with customer service interruptions or vehicle accidents. And what we're really trying to do here is that we can fit. It's just extremely, extremely difficult. And if we could just get the 8 feet added to both sides, we can actually be proactive for once instead of being reactive. I would hate for something to happen to a vehicle and then come back later and say, hey, we need it painted now.
Okay. Questions from the commission?
You just mentioned adding 8 feet on each side, but one of the The sign seems to say that we're talking about an extension of an additional 22 feet on one section.
Yeah, because we do have on this, on the south side, we do have a, 16 feet already of red space. And then adding
So if
even
you're at-
8, it would eliminate.
Then there's not enough for a whole
No.
parking space before the driveway, is that,
No, it's not.
okay.
They might as well take the whole thing. Okay.
So the major issue is this turn right here. Usually there's always cars parked this way.
So which turn?
The turn right here, and even the turn here. But this is the major issue, is because there's always cars parked all the way down. I don't know if you guys have ever driven down that street. And when the truck is making a right, there's a vehicle here, a vehicle here, and it's very, very narrow. And we can't make the truck, and the trucks that we have in Albany, there's 200 trucks at Waste Management of Oakland, and the trucks that we have the tightest turning radius for this reason. It's just, if we could get that extended a little more that way and more this way, it would make it a lot more safe.
So the south curb is to help cars turning right from northbound Neilson
Yes.
onto Albany Terrace. And the north one is for cars from westbound Albany Terrace onto northbound Neilson. Okay.
And Alita, you've been going through the city at different times, painting the curbs at least 20 feet.
Right. We have, whenever we have an opportunity to paint red curbs at intersections, we do it because of safety,
Right,
especially when there's crosswalks.
right.
I do not have the volume of Neilson and Albany Terrace. It doesn't seem that it does have high volumes of traffic, because most of the cars that are parked there, I think, belong to the residents. I mean, there is no destination that actually, there's Albany Terrace, the park, but I don't think people park there because it's a little bit far away if they want to walk to the park. So, for instance, but Marine Avenue that has like 20,000 vehicles per day, and the side streets that are a little bit less, there is a high concern. There is a concern about safety when cars are parked next to the intersection. So, whenever I have the opportunity, I paint. If we're doing restriping or something, I have to, like, for instance, we're going to do the Albany, the ATP striping signage. We talked at the last meeting to include the 20 feet of red curve at the intersections, because it is a safety issue, and especially when there's crosswalks. In that instance, there is no crosswalks, and it's a low volume street, so basically it's more like it operates as a little bit as a cul-de-sac, so it's more like residential traffic.
So if you were to apply your 20-foot rule at this intersection, would you be putting in the red curb that Waste Management is asking for anyway, without consulting with us? Or is Waste Management asking for something more beyond the 20 feet that you usually do?
Well, in this case, if I were to put the 20 feet, it would be on the, first of all, in this case, there's no crosswalk. So the crosswalk that is de facto crosswalk is the one that goes from, I'm going to go here. Is this de facto crosswalk? I don't know if you were able to see.
Along Neilson
So
Street?
crossing Albany Terrace.
Across in Albany
Parallel
Terrace,
to
yeah.
Neilson.
Along Neilson
So if you're doing that, then it would be more like on the vehicles that actually are traveling westbound on Albany Terrace, that actually would have to have visibility of the crosswalk. So it would be more like
So you would be more concerned about the north side?
about the north side, yeah.
And
the
now
south
we're
side.
talking about the south side. which
And
is
any,
different.
like if, I don't think that, I mean, I don't know if people cross Neilson Street from Albany Terrace, but in the event that, because every sidewalk has an extension across the street, could be a crosswalk in this direction, And if that's the case, I will have to observe and actually red curve this side here. You see that, here? It's on the south,
On Neilson
yeah,
Street,
on the
south of
east side of the, south. So that would be my 20 feet.
Okay.
If there is a crosswalk across Neilson.
Okay, so what Waste Management is asking for is really a separate issue from
It's a
the
separate
20-foot
issue,
thing that
yeah.
you would normally do. Okay.
And once again, I am here every single day, Monday through Friday, from 5 a.m. all the way to 3 p.m. I understand how valuable parking is, and I would not make this request if it wasn't really necessary. And the picture here, there's always vehicles parked here, there's always vehicles parked here, there's always vehicles parked here. So you really have from here and then make that wide turn into here.
Right, and I can attest to that. I went to the area a couple of times and it's parked up too. So there's a high demand for parking, yeah.
So can you speak to the question of how this discussion occurred some years ago and was seemingly resolved and now is not really resolved? Is that because the trucks have changed or because the solution that we agreed on previously just wasn't enough?
The trucks have changed in 10 years, but for the better. The brand new trucks, the CNG trucks that you guys have in Albany, have the best turning radius of all the trucks in the entire fleet. I don't know exactly what happened 10 years ago. I can't really speak to that, but I don't know if the parking was as prevalent as it is now.
So it may just be that the allowed parking is more heavily used now than it was
Yeah.
10 years ago?
Because I'll be honest with you,
We're going to open for public
okay.
comment later, after the presentation.
and like I said before, I'll be honest with you, every street is tight in Albany. Every single street. You could go from Canes all the way down, and every street it's very, very difficult to make turns. But I do not want to open any doorway to get every curb red, just this one on Neilson and Albany Terrace.
Oh, and I have one more question for Aleda this time. The flyer refers to issues of emergency response vehicles.
Yeah, emergency response vehicles have problems accessing areas like Washington Avenue on the hill in Albany Terrace. It's emergency response, so at the end, I think if they have an issue, they break the mirrors and they have to access where their emergency is. Might not be the same situation with the waste management. That's.
So you haven't had a request from the fire department to do this?
Have you? Yeah. Have you had a request? You want to come here? Claire Griffin, environmental planner.
Good evening. So we haven't had a formal request from the fire department, but I went and talked to them, and they looked at this street on the map and they said, yeah, we can't get there with our fire truck. And they're also they would park on Neilson ideally, and I think that there are actually unfortunately a lot of places in Albany where that's the case. But certainly, if waste management trucks have difficulty turning there, the fire trucks would not get there. So that's something to consider. And also, they said their ambulance probably can make the turn, but they're purchasing a new ambulance that's larger, so they're not sure of the dimensions yet, but that might end up being a problem.
Okay.
I've got one question. How much off-street parking is on this in this area? I mean, I've driven up there. I drove up there today just to understand what the situation was, and it's definitely cars parked on both sides of Neilson. But
When I went there at about 5 p.m., it was very difficult for me to find parking. It was almost all of it was used.
the street parking.
On a street.
On street. What about off-street? Do the houses have driveways? Do they have
And
garages?
I asked a question to one of the residents. Yeah, most houses have the driveways, and it's the same situation as Washington Avenue. Some driveways actually. I don't know what the garages have, but some driveways are so short that if they park, then the overhang on the right-of-way, public right-of-way. So it's similar to Washington Avenue between Pierce and Gateview.
Okay, good on questions for now. I'm going to open this up to the public, so have a seat. We'll let you know if we have any questions at the end of the public comment. So this is the opportunity to come up and give us your questions and comments.
Evening. My name's Ron Scheel, and I live at 1500 Albany Terrace, which is basically right on the corner where the 22 feet of red curb is being proposed. I've lived there with my family for 12 years, and I can give a little insight into what happened, 5+ years ago. And we had the fire department and the city come out and make measurements. And at that time, they decided that if they painted the curb on Albany Terrace, both sides, 14 feet, that would be sufficient for these emergency vehicles to enter into Albany Terrace. And over the years, we've had no problems. We see ambulances and fire trucks all the time in our neighborhood. It's a very quiet neighborhood, and like was alluded earlier, it is kind of almost a dead-end street at the top of Albany Terrace. I would just like to, further say that, we feel that, we just got this notice on Monday night, and so here we are Thursday, 3 days later. It wasn't much time to respond. I know some of the neighbors are out of town, but it definitely did create quite a stir. Personally, we feel that we're targeted because it's taken away all the parking in front of our house. Back 5 years ago, when they did the striping or the red curb, it took away 14 feet. Basically, took away one parking spot, but it still left us enough room to park, kind of where you see on the screen right now. So, this isn't the only area of Albany, as you can imagine, that has narrow streets, and I can just envision that, you start painting curbs here, and then it just opens it up to other areas that Waste Management would like to have better, access. I don't think this problem has been adequately studied. There's definitely a lot of discrepancy as to which curbs should be painted and what length, and also, the bigger picture, I think, if you just step back and say, well, do we really want to be painting curbs in our city here, and restricting, parking that's already pretty limited? Maybe we should step back and go, these streets aren't getting any bigger. This is the infrastructure we have in the city. Has anyone looked at, the contract that we have with Waste Management? How are they serving our city, and should they be trying to accommodate us with a truck that has a better turning radius? There definitely are smaller trucks available, and I provided some information that shows those trucks. Some of them are single axle trucks that are in Waste Management's fleet. So, I think, getting down to really addressing the issue would be, getting trucks that work within our community and not trying to inconvenience all the residents and property owners. Personally, we're really concerned about our property value. Not having parking eliminated in front of our house is definitely going to have an impact. Not only that, is just the inconvenience of our family entering and exiting our car and trying to enter our house. So, I appreciate, that, or I would wish that the council give further consideration to this matter and really explore some of the options that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peter Rosenfeld. I live at 1038 Neilson. which is sort of right here. We've lived there for almost 20 years now, going on July. And I've seen, I guess first I'd like to say that I really sympathize with Waste Management, their problems getting down that street. I'm sure it's expensive for them. I've seen several cars get dinged there over the years, and I'm sure it slows them down a lot, having to work that very tight area. I'd also like to say your crews are very friendly and professional, and I want to give them their props. But I'm opposed to this idea of taking away a parking space permanently. I would suggest to the council that you explore the possibility of a one-night only solution. Maybe paint the curb black. I don't think that's a color that's used in general traffic codes. And a sign giving them from, say, midnight Sunday till 6 o'clock Monday. I know they have some days where they don't pick up on Monday. And by the way, in case you're unaware, we're talking about Mondays. That's when they pick up here. I think that's a solution that would allow them more room to get their trucks through if there was no parking, maybe around this corner and that corner at that specific time period. I think that would solve 90% or more of their problem. As far as the emergency vehicle situation, that would have to be explored in some other way. But I think that kind of a solution would, benefit everybody. Why lose a parking space for 7 days when with a little bit of compromise, you can lose it for 1 day and have it for 6? And as far as other information, yes, parking is very tight in the neighborhood. Anytime you come home after, say, 11 o'clock at night, I'm exceeding my time.
You have another minute.
If you come home late at night, 10 or 11 o'clock, it's full. Everybody's gotten home by then. And as far as the driveway issue, we have a driveway. We had 2 cars parked in it for a long time. Just sold the truck, so have a little more room there, but most driveways there are used. I know up most of Neilson Street, practically everybody has one of their extra vehicles parked in a driveway. So it's not as if there's space going unused. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So just to throw out the obvious question based on the last comments, as far as Waste Management's concerned, you only need the no parking on the pickup days.
Yes, and that would be Monday.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, we're usually out of there by the latest 1 p.m. on Monday.
So what would be the times? From what time to what time?
I would say anytime Sunday night, if you wanted to start at midnight to go to 1 p.m. or noon. I don't know if you guys have specific times that are allocated for.
In some other areas, it's from 10 to 4, from 10 to 1 or something. Like Keynes, for instance, is 10 to 1, I think, or 10 to 2. So I don't know if that works for you. So.
They don't service until 7 a.m. unless
Right.
there's construction, but
Okay.
they want to get in there at 7 a.m., right?
Yeah.
They're there by 7.
Yeah, the very, very latest would be 10, 11.
Right. But to be safe, 1 p.m.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
And for the most part, it sounds like the parking challenge is at night when residents get home. Most residents aren't getting home at noon. Some may, but again, trying to manage and balance this out. Having the restrictions start at midnight means that you don't have residents needing to remember to get up at 6:30 in the morning and try to move their car, which, while it seems like it'd be more convenient to be able to park overnight, could complicate things in practice. But that's, subject to discussion here.
Do you have examples of other places where a one-day restriction like that has been successful?
We do not, because we understand fully how prevalent the parking issue is in Albany, so we only bring it to areas that we really feel need it.
Right, but I mean, even in other towns, does this kind of thing tend to work out, or do people tend to forget and park there anyway and cause problems?
Usually it works out. I know specifically in Castro Valley and Orloma, they have whole sides of streets that are designated, almost like the street sweeping is,
Yeah,
but
that-
for the garbage vehicles.
That was my concern, is that it would be treated like the street sweeping, which is completely ignored in Albany, as far as I can tell.
Signs in most places, it's voluntary. This, I think, in terms of implementation, if we were to pursue it, a sign is the way to go. We wouldn't paint the curb, because most people wouldn't recognize what some arbitrary color might mean, but a sign that says no parking here to corner, Mondays from 12:01 a.m. to, 1 p.m., something like that. We might say 1 a.m. I think the point of not wanting to confuse people, if you say midnight, like, do you mean midnight
01,
Saturday,
yeah.
midnight Sunday? So we pick something that's as easy and clear as possible. But a sign, now, that means there's going to be a sign in front of someone's house. May not be the most sightly thing, but if it's preserving a parking space, maybe it's worth it.
The only thing that doesn't address are emergency vehicles, but I guess they'll get there if they have to get there.
Well, they have an immunity if they knock off mirrors and things like that. Now they're
Yeah.
going to try not to do that, obviously.
Yeah, but they do have immunity.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than just knocking off the mirror. I think it's not being able to make the turn. But I would like to see, we're doing the parking survey, I think it's later on the agenda, but to maybe look at the emergency vehicles on a more comprehensive citywide basis rather than just this one area. And so at this point, just to focus more on the waste management for this particular intersection.
Well, one thing we can do right now is to implement signage, see if people comply with it, and I would really ask the neighbors, the residents of the area, to actually talk to your neighbors too, and try to, say, well, the trade-off is that if we don't comply, we might have.
We used to do, actually.
Yeah.
Years and years ago, people sort of, after one car got dinged, they sort of said, don't park there tonight. That was quite common.
I can also go back with the flyers and say, we're going to implement this signage. Please comply with the signage. And that's something that.
I don't think it would be a problem.
Okay. I would just add that, I think you're putting a Band-Aid on the problem, because, the bigger picture here is the size of these trucks within Albany. And I can tell you firsthand, just up the street here, up Albany Terrace at the corner, is a fire hydrant. Twice it's been hit now. You've probably heard of it. When this garbage truck, too big for Albany, was making the corner, it hit the fire hydrant. It punctured its diesel tank, and diesel flowed all the way down Albany Terrace to the storm drain. Now this has happened twice. Luckily, the second time it dented the gas tank or the diesel tank, but it didn't puncture it. Now this is a corner at the top of Albany Terrace where it's already painted all red. Nobody parks if there's a fire hydrant, and the truck still can't make the corner. So, this is a clear example where if, parking is not correcting the problem.
Okay. So, any thoughts? Obviously, we're not going to ask people to roll their waste carts down to Neilson Street so the truck doesn't have to make the turn. We expect service to get to every house. So I think that there are going to be spots that are tight, and that's kind of a given. I think we want to protect people's cars to the extent we can. Certainly hope that the drivers have learned to avoid the fire hydrant you got to slow down making those turns. That, hopefully twice is more than enough to figure that part out. Is this tight? Sure. Oh, yeah.
It'd be interesting to know what our neighboring cities are doing. How do they, get their garbage picked up? What sort of vehicles are they using? This is a citywide issue. It's not this corner only.
Well, I would certainly encourage the residents to pursue that if you're interested, but we've heard from Waste Management that these trucks that they're using now have the tightest turning radius in the fleet, so I don't know that.
And I submitted information that there are single axle trucks in Waste Management's fleet that they're not being used.
Sure, smaller trucks exist. Waste Management potentially could buy more particularly small trucks. Of course, then you've got to run the trucks more frequently. We had a pretty sizable increase in our fees the last time the contract was renewed, and that would only go up if we went with smaller trucks. One of the biggest expenses is staff. So if we have to increase the number of drivers by 40% because we cut the size of the trucks in half in terms of carrying capacity, it's a big expense. So while I fully appreciate that there's physically an option that exists, everything that we do is having some consequence. And I think that we need to find a balance that seems, to be in scale with the problem here. We're not going to solve everything, but what can we reasonably improve?
I think there's a measured increase in cars parked on our streets in Albany. I don't know if that means everybody has extra cars, or in the many years that I've lived here, it just seems like there's got to be, we got to try to strike some balance. When you talk about your routes in Albany, do you cover all the routes in Albany or just this particular one, or when you're speaking to us about this issue?
I cover all of them.
You cover all of the routes in Albany, and so out of all the routes in Albany, this is the biggest pain point.
Yep.
There are a lot of really tight places in Albany, and I think that's pretty amazing that there's one. I mean, that isn't licensed to you to add a bunch more, but I think I have to listen to that kind of,
Right.
plea, I think, because I see the cars are taking up, I know on my neighborhood too, we're car heavy.
Right. And I know that we have a lot of narrow streets. This one to me really stands out because Neilson is one of the narrower streets we've got around. And Albany Terrace, I can't imagine a street in town that's narrower than that. So you put two narrow intersecting streets together, it's very constrained. If you have a narrow street intersecting a larger street where Neilson hits Sonoma, for example, it's not so bad making those turns. So while I appreciate that this may not be the only place where there's difficulty making turns, this is kind of an exceptional location where maybe 5% of the intersections in the town are even close to this tight, if that. So I'm not anticipating that we're setting a precedent to run around red curbing every intersection in town. We certainly have plenty that have red curbs for pedestrian safety reasons, storm drains that have to be accessible to keep them from getting clogged so that we can pull debris out of them when it rains. I know that there was certainly an effort in some places to red curb those. In terms of loss of parking in front of a house, if it's 1 day a week and there's 4 parking spaces around the corner, growing up on a corner lot, I know how that works. It's going to be an inconvenience to have to move cars. There's no doubt about that. But I kind of feel like that is a very elegant suggestion from the neighborhood and one that is worth pursuing. If the fire department hasn't complained and the 14 feet of existing red curb has been sufficient for them, I kind of feel like let's leave that where it is. If they raise a concern, then we have a whole different issue, and we'll talk about that then. But for now, half-day a week parking prohibition hopefully improves things for waste management, and is a compromise.
I move that we direct staff to limit parking from 1 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Mondays in the 2 areas indicated. Do I need to add anything to that?
Do I have a second?
With a sign? or-
And sign it.
Second.
Comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Can I make a general comment?
Certainly.
Related to this subject? We have a lot of people from neighborhoods in Albany and businesses who come up and speak about how much they value their parking spaces and how terrible it is to take them away. But people residents and businesses in Albany are not acting as though they value their parking spaces. They are insisting that they be given away to the first comer in every possible circumstance, and that anybody who wants it can take it for as long as they want. And that's not the way you treat a resource that you cherish. And if people really care about availability of parking in their neighborhood, I think we, the commission and the people who are asking for us to preserve parking, should all be prepared to consider some more effective ways of managing the parking supply so that it will not be so tight in the future, so that we won't have to have an argument every time we consider taking away one space. People think taking away one space is going to just ruin everything. In fact, taking away one space makes a very small impact on the overall situation, and at the same time you can have an extremely strong positive impact by installing meters and having permits, having residents and visitors pay for the parking that they cherish so much, and having the money be directed into improvements to the neighborhood or to the area where the businesses are, so that the people who live there feel like the parking in their neighborhood now is valuable in more ways. And we don't hear anybody requesting that, which makes me think that maybe people don't quite cherish the parking as much as they say they do. Thanks.
Right. So our next item, 6C, is traffic calming policy and school zones.
I included in your packet the existing, the current traffic calming policy that we have in Albany. It was adopted in 2007, and we have been using this traffic calming policy to address the issues about speeding on residential streets, and to guide us on the implementation of traffic calming features. Mostly here is used the speed hump. Well, I also included the current California vehicle code regarding to speed zones for senior centers and schools. And as it was discussed by Chair Javandel last time, we will have to conduct a professional or engineering study that actually validates the speed surveys on the street that we would like to implement the speed zone. According to these regulations of the California Vehicle Code, it seems that the only one that is eligible is Solano Avenue, is Cornell. If we want to do something for the senior center, I think we can do it also on Masonic. So the limitation is that the street has to be a two-way, one lane in each direction. And also, you have heard whenever I conduct the speed surveys that people still, even though with the 85th percentile that we have in the policy, people still come here and said, no, we still have speeding. And of course, there is a 15% that will go beyond that 85th percentile that sometimes is in the 29th mile per hour, which seems pretty high because it's approaching the threshold. I just want to say that some other cities that I've been researching, they include, and if we want maybe mathematically correct, we have to include the variance in the level of confidence in the interval. But that will actually for instance, in streets that are like 29 miles per hour, it depends if we have a confidence interval of, 95. So then some of the streets that are in the 28th will be eligible, because there is a range. This is a range. It's not a point in the count. So that is not, according to my research, that is not really what the industry dictates. The industry is actually looking at the 85th percentile, and in Farid, you can actually attest to that. Right. Those other cities, I guess, want to go a little bit beyond what the industry dictates, but in general, I think the practice is to look at the 85th percentile. So those are the things that I would like to mention. Also, food for thought is that measure. The other thing could be what we have, according to the California law, is that it's 25 miles per hour on residential streets, and people have also said that 25 seems a little bit high, but it's what the state actually it's currently implementing, and it goes by, and it's also based on the physical characteristics of every street, which if a reasonable driver actually drives at 25 because of the physical characteristics of the street, like that is including width, line of vision, parking on both sides, horizontal and vertical curves. So that is also something that if we have to think about if decreasing the speed limit will actually lead to non-compliance, consistent non-compliance, because we're not taking into consideration the characteristics of the street. So it is a balanced equation, and it's a balanced situation, and I think it's good to discuss it right now. So I'm open to questions. We have an expert also on the commission, so I would be really, really interested in knowing, in learning about your thoughts and your ideas for a traffic calming. My idea is also to include more than speed humps, to include striping, to include chicanes, although, by the way, at the next meeting, we're going to consider the chicanes on Santa Fe Avenue. I think there is a valid a way to implement chicanes, but depending on the situation. So with that, please.
Okay.
Comments.
Actually, I had an interesting time giving a lecture on traffic calming last night at San Jose State. But this all is very familiar at the moment.
Well, give us your lecture. It's fresh.
Oh, give us the lecture.
Well, no, I think that the last couple points that you made, Aleda, in terms of traffic calming with non-vertical deflection types of things, the horizontal deflections, chicanes, bulb outs, striping, it kind of comes back to the idea of creating a visual friction on the street rather than a physical impediment, that if that visual friction can be achieved, what it does, and again, this is the characteristics of the street that you talked about, causes drivers to choose to drive at a slower speed. They drive at the speed at which they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. You make them less comfortable at the higher speeds. Psychologically, they go slower, and then they're not feeling the need to make up for lost time between devices, between stop signs, mm-hmm. between speed humps. And you ultimately, at that point, are getting better results because people are driving more cautiously and they're not feeling unhappy about it. Where if you use sort of physical devices, there tends to be a bit of rebellion on the part of some drivers, not all. And so I think that that's definitely something that's worth pursuing. Those things that try to catch the attention of drivers to okay, I got to slow down because I don't feel like I have as much width, and reminding drivers to be more vigilant rather than careless. You know, we hear a lot about distracted driving and the need to avoid that. And the more that people slow down and engage with their environment, the better off we are. Riding a bike, you're very cognizant of what's around you. Even when I used to ride a scooter, again, you don't have windows and everything surrounding you, so you're more engaged with your environment. I almost feel like if people drove around with their car windows rolled down, they'd feel the speed more. They'd hear what's going on around them more. They'd be more engaged with the neighborhood, and that's what's going to get the kind of behavior that we ultimately want to have, versus going to extremes where we barricade off streets and put all kinds of obstacles everywhere that negatively impact us and may or may not achieve the end goals we have. So
Fewer SUVs, more convertibles.
you bet. I think that actually would help. So much of it is mental rather than physical, getting people to be aware. The pace car program, things like that. Just getting people to recognize that if the speed limit's posted at 25, that's supposed to be the maximum speed. So that if someone's going 24, you shouldn't feel entitled to honk at them because they're going too slow. They're not. They're obeying the speed limit. And yet, the common perception is, darn it, you're going too slow and you're making me mad and I'm going to zip around you or drive in the bike lane, some other crazy thing. And so it really is challenging to change the public perception and behavior, but we have to sort of help set the expectations and get people to voluntarily comply.
Right, it is difficult.
The Complete Streets program, you know, or when we were walking San Pablo, and you know, the difference between Albany and San Pablo and just going into Berkeley, where there's you want to go a little slower, just more interest on the street, that, you know, just feels like you're in a town, whereas we make it just really bland and fast. So, but, you know, we need to do that on the other streets, not just the main drag.
Well, it occurred to me then, I think the last meeting or the meeting before, when the family came that lives on, I think, Polk, and it struck me that I grew up on Marin. As a little kid, I ran across the street to play with the neighbors, and we ran back and forth all day long at, you know, early elementary school. Didn't think anything about it. And it occurred to me that the streets are the same, but there's so many more cars, and there's so many more cars going faster, that we need to change the streets. That we haven't really done that over the last many decades. We've just left them the way they used to be, and you can't do that. You know, kids can't run back and forth across the street anymore, on any street. And we need to try to figure out a way to fix that. And I like the non-punitive. I don't like the punitive barriers and slow down to 10 miles an hour and then go fast to the next hurdle. And I think the other way is much better.
Is there any studies that find that people get used to the striping?
I haven't seen anything that suggests that that's the case. Once people have sort of a fixed expectation of what's comfortable for the most part, you do definitely see, you know, the whole concept of velocitization. Someone gets on the freeway and they're just cruising along at 65 miles an hour for a long distance, and then they get off the freeway, and even going 30, they feel like they're going really slow.
Right.
And they're not. So it's getting accustomed to something. But I haven't seen anything that suggests that driving past the same narrow spot in the roadway that you tend to get so accustomed to it that you speed up. Certainly familiarity on twisty, windy roads, you know what's around the corner because you've driven it hundreds of times. You tend to feel more comfortable going faster, but we're not hiding things here. It's still maybe a straight street, but the feeling of proximity to obstacles, and parked cars are changing all the time. SUV there, or space is empty next time. There's enough variability. I haven't seen that. I mean, it's certainly possible, but there's nothing that I've seen specifically that suggests it. There may be. But what that's competing with is the other concept of, as you get used to seeing other cars going slower, you get a sense of what's appropriate for the space. So I think that may offset getting used to the...
So I really like all of the ideas that you're talking about, and we've talked about them in this commission before. Can you think of anything new to add, or any sort of policy changes to recommend to make it more feasible for us to do this more of the time? And
Well, I think what, Aleda's mentioned, doing chicanes, which are physical, but they are less impactful physically, is useful. Some of the striping alternatives to traffic calming that we've supported recently, I think, are definitely on the right track.
yeah, I mean, we support those when they come up in discussion, but do we need like a more universal or overarching policy about it, or is our kind of case-by-case preference for that enough?
Given unlimited resources, I think we would run around and implement stuff like this all over the place. But as it stands, I think we are kind of limited to finding the problem spots and tackling them one at a time. But as we, for example, when we pave streets, we should always be thinking, how are we going to restripe this street after we pave it, with fresh markings? Do we go back to what we had before? Is this a bike route? A context-sensitive approach to how we redo things. And, do we have the crosswalks in the right place? Are they the right size? Do we need a center line? Do we not need a center line? Based on how wide the roadway is, parking edge lines, a lot of those things, we really need to look for where the opportunities come up.
Are those things that would be helpful to have captured, that we want edge lines,
right?
Matter of course.
Do we need to codify this?
Yeah.
Well, in a way, it's, we have kind of a complete streets policy, and this is an implementation policy, perhaps, that says, when we're doing a new street or project, these are the things we want to look at. Not necessarily mandating that we have to do edge lines, but saying we should think about it and recognize that may increase our maintenance costs for striping, but it may be worth it.
I'm especially thinking ahead to a time when we may not have a professional traffic engineer on our commission who's always here to remind us of these things. Is there a way we can put this into city policy so that even with 5 bozos sitting here, we end up getting to the right idea?
Far from that.
So the striping, actually, the edge lines and things like that, we should really maybe before step 3 or after step 3, when it says process stops at this point, maybe we should say, well, consider other options. Process to implement actual, deflections on the pavement stops here, but there are other options to consider, like striping. And one thing that I always find a little bit challenging is how to reduce speeds on hills, especially downhill. The downhill traffic is the traffic that actually speeds up, and it's been a challenge because according to this policy, we cannot do speed humps. The warrant for stop signs, also stop signs mid-hill is not, well, maybe.
Well, I think that what we have now is a toolbox of techniques we can use for traffic calming. What we maybe haven't formalized that I think it would be wise to consider is a toolbox for soft traffic calming. So cases that don't meet the the thresholds for the regular traffic calming tools, but where we feel like we really ought to do something. What are those some things that we could do? Let's, prepare a toolbox and say, we can consider this kind of striping. And on a downhill, maybe we do the pavement stripes that are, getting closer and closer together, so if people feel like they're accelerating, techniques like that, striped chicanes, recognizing, in a lot of cases that may cost parking, and we may be fine with that. Well, residents may not be fine with that, but it's something that, like, you've got a trade-off. You've got speed, you'd like to slow that down. What can you do? Can you afford to give up a couple parking spaces to get something better? And even if residents decide they don't want to do that, it's something we can offer. I think it's fair to put things on the table that allow people to make a judgment call on what's more important to them, their parking space or the perception of safety on their street.
Is it possible to reverse the order so that even if a survey showed that the volume and the speed is enough that you could put in a traffic hump, for lack of a better term, that instead of starting with the more punitive, that you would start with the striping or whatever and see how that works. And if it doesn't work, then maybe you need to go back and look at it. But it almost seems like we're saying that the striping and all of those things are good and are satisfactory, but we're going to give you this punitive thing anyway, and that doesn't make sense to me.
I'm sorry, okay, can you explain? I don't know if are you saying that reverse the order? So first,
To do the striping or the calmer traffic calming, the softer was like.
even when on blocks that actually qualify, that actually meet this criteria.
Or perhaps a slightly different suggestion is to decide to implement those measures before even taking the measurements. And then take the measurement and see if there's still enough of a problem that the speed bump is required.
Well, you have to think about 3 people on the Public Works Department trying to, because that means that all the streets in Albany will have to do that.
Pretty much just for calling up and asking, you're going to get your street restriped. It's kind of setting a high bar for staff to follow through.
I think it's a fair, it's a fair question to say. I mean, we, just like many of the people that come here, they just assume it's a speed hump is the answer. I think, I don't know, I'm trying to put words in your mouth. I think basically it's sort of like, we know, because I think there's been several speed humps that have been pulled back out because the neighbors realized that it wasn't the answer, maybe 1 or 2. But, maybe it's okay for us to say, have you thought about these? Or, we would like to see what these would do before we go to the speed.
Yeah, towards that end, one approach that hopefully is less impact on staff is to say, we go through the regular policy and divide things into applications that meet the criteria, applications that don't. Either one, we're going to start with some type of soft traffic calming. The ones that didn't meet the criteria, once we offer that up and it's accepted or not, we're done. No follow-up. If it did meet the criteria, we implement it, come back a year later, measure the speed again, and if they still qualify, then we'll talk to them about putting in a hard traffic calming device. But if the problem was solved, then we say, great, we've addressed it with a less drastic technique, which hopefully is more cost effective for us.
But if that's our approach, then what is the benefit of doing the speed assessment, the first speed assessment?
Well, to figure out whether we're going to have to follow up or whether we're just going to implement something and call it done.
Right, but the follow-up is a speed assessment, and
it's a second speed assessment that lets us know whether we were effective or not.
Right, but it seems it would save staff effort if they didn't have to do the first speed assessment.
Need a baseline.
Well,
I don't know. I
maybe
think
we set two thresholds. 30 miles an hour for hard traffic calming, 28 for soft traffic calming, and if you meet either one of those, you start with the soft traffic calming. So you still got to do the data collection. Now the data collection at least is contracted out, right?
No.
Oh, we do it ourselves? Okay.
So is the thought of
Okay, I'm
having
too
to
used to
do
that.
2 data collections on some of these blocks?
I don't
does that
do-
feel like an extra burden to you?
Well, I guess I'm protecting myself here, but I don't do 2 speed surveys within a year on the same street. So,
Even if there's been a treatment in between?
No, even if
Follow-ups,
it's-
we don't have really resources to do.
Yeah, so it sounds like we may not be able
you have to
Yeah.
think that it's only myself who does transportation here. So,
I mean, I guess,
in a more, like maybe a larger city or a city that has more resources, it would be really cool to have another transportation person, but
no, I'm just trying to find a way to get the same effect that we're looking for here with less staff effort. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it so that you don't have to do a second speed assessment.
well, and as I said, people raise the issue of speeding, we have to test it. So, okay, so you are right, you have a speeding. Like, for instance, the Polk Street is one. And even the person who actually installed the house said, you're going to find it here. And then he says he's now trained. He said, no, that street, we're just putting it because of the request, but there's no speeding here. And he's usually right. So, I mean, this is because he's doing it over and over and over. So, and basically, he's a member of the public works crew, so who happens to be to have studied 3 years of engineering, so he knows more or less what to see and what to look for. So, but for instance, there are some streets that we have the issue of speeding, and according to the policy, there is a process to follow if we find speeding, which is okay. The next step is to get your signatures. The next step is actually for me to locate a possible area where the speed hump will be. And then with that address, specifically ask the homeowner or the property owner, do you agree to this? Because that's been the problem in Orway, for instance, that we identify location and the people who lived right there said, no, we don't want that. And then if that happens, then we have a problem. So, but I think if somebody has a complaint and they garner the support of their neighbors, I think we should, and I think we should take a speed survey to validate whatever concerns they have.
So they come up with the issue, they collect names, we take a speed survey.
And sometimes they don't collect names. They just call me and said, I think we have a speed survey. A speed problem. Okay, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah. They come here and so.
Well, should there be a threshold then?
Maybe
for
that's going to
name
be
collection or
before the action.
So do the petition before we do the survey.
See, I don't know. I mean, that's not usually the case on every city. When I research it, I mean, they just hear from the residents. Sometimes they go to the city council meeting and then the city council say, okay, Public Works, conduct a speed survey, or they commission the speed survey to a company. So usually they do have the equipment to conduct the speed survey. So I don't know, does Berkeley have that?
No, we use a consultant to do our data collection. We also require the neighborhood to do a petition of support for traffic calming study before we do anything.
So maybe that's a saver for us, because right now.
Because right now it seems like just anyone could pick up the phone and control your time.
Yes,
you know,
that's right.
I mean, like, and maybe there needs to be a vetting of that, which would be, you know, it's not just one person picking up the phone. It's get a couple people together. I don't know what the number is, but. To say, yeah, we would like this investigated further, and then it could go through this process of, you know, to get the baseline
Right.
And
I
then,
usually
is it
talk
soft,
to
is it
them,
hard?
when I talk to them, I usually, because after the always experience, I talk to them and say, well, some people don't like the speed humps, so you have to really make sure that what you're asking is something, I mean, in case we find that they're speeding, you might have some problems with your neighbors actually agreeing to a speed hump. Oh, no, I already talked to them, or yes, maybe you're right, I'm gonna start talking to them, and then I wait to hear what happens. But that's kind of like an informal way, kind of diverting from the policy. Maybe we should really put it on the policy that if you're gonna pick up the phone, send, it says here that it has to be in writing. So,
I mean, if they contact you and say, we have a speeding problem, you can send them a form that says, all right, here's a description of what we consider to be the problem. Here's a petition that everyone's going to sign, and they're going to recognize that the solutions may include a speed hump in front of their house.
Right, but I think it also may include other options.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, maybe that's a education point for the community in that, no, it's not only, the answer isn't always speed hump, because it's not. I mean, I learned a lot just by coming on the commission that, no, it's not. It can't go on a grade, it can't go on, but most people don't know that. They don't think that through,
I send them, what I do is I send them the policy. This is what it is. So I send them the policy.
But if the policy had some of these other options,
That's what I wanted to incorporate,
Right.
some other options in the policy.
Right.
And that's something maybe I need to do and bring back to the commission for consideration. And then we can actually start from that. I mean, including the striping, actually, for the two thresholds, as you said, and 28 and or 28.5 and then 30. 28.5 and or 28 and up. Between 28 and 30, you can have striping. 30, you're eligible for the deflections, but then or other forms of traffic calming, but there's an option to start with the soft measures. And actually, these actually tie that to the actual budget that we have, I think. Because if we don't have in next fiscal year to implement, money to implement the speed humps or whatever else,
Right.
then we should start with striping.
Right.
Well, and are you suggesting that we would give them the option of which they would choose, or would we choose for them?
I think one, for the 30 mile per hour and over, I think they should know that they're eligible for the hard, I mean, that according to the policy, your street has speeding. So we have to control it in some way. But in some instances, we don't have money to implement at one point, we consider people actually asking people to contribute money to that. We found a problem with that because then it's an equity problem.
We could use the revenue from the parking meters for that.
Yes, that would be an option, yeah. And actually, I didn't want to say anything because I don't think it's on the agenda right now. I don't even remember what it is, but we might be moving to that direction. It might take long, but we're moving to that direction.
How many are, when you just, historically, how many over 30?
Not much, not many.
How many are under?
Not many blocks have actually measured over 30. Maybe about, I would say 5% of all of my measurements measure over 30. Maybe about 15% go closer to 30, which is 28 or 29. Actually, 29.3 doesn't even round up to 30, and that's when I actually keep my eyes open. When a block actually measured 29.3, maybe I go back again a year later and measure again. To see if
some of those over 30 can't have speed humps, right?
And we have been implemented most of the over 30 with the speed humps.
But if they can't, there's even other things that.
I was thinking that depending on the city's ability to pay at a determined fiscal year or month within the fiscal year, we can actually offer we can offer to start with striping, because that's the only solution, or wait until we have budget for the implementation of speed hump, chicanes, or barriers, or whatever. Barriers are more drastic, so they don't really want it.
Or the speed signs, right? That's one.
Speed signs we can implement, and that's not really expensive.
The ones with that tell
Oh.
you your speed?
Oh, no. I'm
Speed
talking
feedback
about, no,
signs
those
are
are
expensive,
expensive.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
those
right.
are.
But those are all tools in traffic calming. I
We
mean, like,
usually
it's
have
not
those, there's a volume, like for instance, I don't think that I'm going to use those on residential streets with 600 vehicles per day. But yeah, on piers, for instance, Piers has actually, and I know that you live there, but Piers measure at 33 before the pavement and then measure at 30 after the pavement, which is still, so.
Okay, so.
But that's what this is the whole thing, right? Indicating, this is the process. And
Yes.
it should kind of incorporate the bag of tricks that we have.
Yeah.
But also not kill you in the process necessarily. Right, I think it needs to be a smart process that that can educate. I think within the process, it could help educate the community before they even walk in this
Right.
door and think it's only speed humps that are my answer.
And that's why I want to also bring the educational program, because, okay, we have the freeway here, I-80, 580, people drive 75, whatever it is, and then they just exit on Buchanan, and they should immediately be stopped and have a different expectation of what they're going to find on the street. I'm going to find pedestrians, more vehicles, people, students. So,
Has the Pierce Street stoplight helped speeds on Buchanan? Do we know?
right now, we are actually doing, with the I-80 ICM study, we're doing signal synchronization, starting from San Pablo and including the Jackson and Pierce light. So you know that in about 2 years, there's going to be meter lights on the on-ramp. So one thing I've been asking them is to be careful not to cause congestion, too much congestion, because everything is related up to Marine Avenue. We also are applying for a grant for the MTC. It's a TTAP grant for signal synchronization. So we're doing that because we want to install satellite clocks on the other signals that we have on Marine Avenue. We haven't been able to do that because the signals are too old that they cannot be synchronized. So it's just like... So right now we're trying to update them a little bit, and then get some synchronization, maintaining 25 miles per hour on the corridor, and coordinate with the meter lights that are going to be effective in 2015, I think. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're probably starting to repeat ourselves at this point, and I want to kind of bring us back for a moment to the question of the reduced speed school zones.
Yeah, and I have it ready here. So, also there's an opportunity to conduct a professional survey on Solano Avenue, because we just had a contract with TJKM for the engineering speed surveys for the police enforcement, enforcement. Solano, it was included in the list of streets. It was removed, but I can ask them to do it again, to include them again. So
Right.
I think, because if we're going to do this, we should have that
Right.
information.
And just to be clear, in terms of the engineering speed survey that's required, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive study. You need to measure what the speeds are to see what the 85th percentile speed is.
So, section 627, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
it could be my metro count,
yeah, Metro Count could do it.
and then Ray, you sign it.
Yeah, so you'd get the speeds and volumes, and if the 85th percentile speed was 20 or 15, you would...
I do have to get the collision rate, the expected collision rate, is that right?
So
I can do that.
You should be able to pull that. So the speed, volume, and collision rates are really all that you need. You don't have to do a whole lot more processing than that. And then either it meets the regular vehicle code criteria for reducing the speed limit, or it doesn't, in which case it can go to council, and then council by resolution can declare, because it's a school zone, we're going to,
Reduce it.
reduce the speed limit to 20 or 15 because it meets all the other criteria in spite of the 85th percentile speed
Right.
being whatever it happens to be.
And I have a question also. Does that apply also to Cornell and Talbot?
Yes.
So basically, I have to collect information on Cornell and Talbot.
Yeah. That was the conclusion that we reached when we did it in Berkeley, that you have to do the survey even if the survey doesn't support reducing the speed.
Yeah.
Just the way that it was written to be sure that it was
Yeah,
enforceable. It seems a little silly to do it, but it's the way that it's written, so we followed that. So Berkeley was able to, within the last month, set up the 15-mile-an-hour speed zones around 14 schools, I think.
Wow, nice.
Be careful driving around schools in Berkeley when children are present, which means when they're on their way to or from school or during the lunch period, because now it's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. I think that's something that we could do. It just, you have to jump through a couple of hoops, then take it to council, and if council supports it, we would be able to implement that.
So I think also Brighton Middle School, or does it include middle schools and high schools?
Not sure about high schools. I'd have to double check on the middle schools. I think we did just elementary schools in Berkeley.
It's not really specific here. It doesn't. It says schools, isn't it?
I'll have to look again.
Could you clarify, is it only Cornell that we can do?
Yeah, according right now, just to look at I think it's only.
And
Well,
why
you
is
could.
that?
We can't do Buchanan because it's a 4-lane street. It's not a 2-lane street. We theoretically could do Jackson, although technically it's the university right of way, not ours. We could do Jackson north of Buchanan. That's within 500 feet of the school.
And Jackson, I think, is one of the higher 85th percentile.
Yeah, well, that's one where I think we could have some pretty decent benefit to do that street. We could do Cornell and Talbot within 500 feet of the school, so that could be north of Solano included. South of Marin might be too far. We'd have to check the distance. We could do Curtis, we could do Santa Fe.
Can you do Marin?
Maybe I'll talk to you about the location of the survey, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I know that you're busy, but I mean, if you can give me some ideas about the location where I should put the hoses, that would be cool.
Yeah, we could look at a map and pick some spots. But I think that pretty much any of the schools, the elementary schools in particular, there are streets adjacent to them that would qualify. I think Marin is a challenge because
it's the center line.
Technically a 3-lane street. That, and strategically, I probably wouldn't try to reduce the speed limit on Marin to 15 because that would cause a lot of people to want to find shortcuts.
It's pretty much the only street, east-west street through Albany that is kind of a through street.
Yeah, one of the big concerns was the road diet on Marin would make people cut over to Dartmouth and Sonoma and these other streets, and that largely didn't happen based on the data that was collected. But if we were to drop it to 15 miles an hour, I think we'd pass the tipping point and we'd start to push traffic into neighborhoods, and that would be detrimental. So
Also, it might cause some more congestion. People get really.
It certainly would, I think.
But if you could do, like you said, Curtis and Santa Fe, I think that
Yeah.
would solve the problem around the school.
Right.
basically.
Santa Fe already has speed bumps there.
So, I mean, reducing the speed limit. when
Oh,
children
they're
are
really
present
good
would be
ones. I
fine.
love this pizza.
We can definitely pursue that.
Okay, so next step, and by the way, I'm going to be very busy in the next 3 weeks, so I'm not offering to work on this for the main meeting.
Come back when you're ready.
Yeah, the first thing is to, I can order the speed survey,
Right.
and maybe what I'll do is on the Google map or something like that, you can send me a location or I can suggest a location, send it to you, and you give me your feedback.
Sure.
That's going to be, so I can start the process. And at least we can take, so how many days? 3 days? 1 week? I usually take 1 week surveys, but.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's for a school zone, the weekends aren't really so relevant, so I think it's
Yeah.
perfectly adequate to do a 3-day survey,
3-day
Tuesday,
survey.
Wednesday, Thursday.
Or even if it's 1 week, I actually can lower the, the time.
Right, what you're looking at.
Uh-huh, yeah. Okay, so I'll do that, and that's gonna be my task. So next is, oh, I'm sorry, it's you are next.
So the other question I was going to ask is, what's our cutoff time since we started late?
Yeah, well, before it was 9:30, right now it's almost, we're approaching. Do you want to table this for the next
So
meeting?
2.5 hours, we pretty much are.
We're not there yet. We have
We're getting
20 minutes
close.
to go.
Okay, so do you want to report on Measure D working
But
group?
before we finish
Oh,
that, I just
okay.
wanted to be clear. So from our earlier discussion about the general policy for traffic calming, is that something that you can work on? Like developing?
Not before May 21st.
No, not urgently, but I mean, do you?
I can work on
in the long
reviewing the
run.
policy. Yeah, I can bring it back to the commission with the menu of traffic calming and the menu of striping options. By the way, if you have time, take a look at some a crosswalk that I painted. I mean, not really. It's just with the spray by Pomona and Washington. And actually, a lot of drivers were saying, crosswalks at last. Yeah, isn't that great? I said, well, the driver said, 40 years later. So there were a lot of people and a lot of pedestrians with children were crossing there. They were happy to see the crosswalks. If I can go here, well, I don't want to take more of your time, but I'll show you what I mean, if you drive by it, have you driven by it? Okay. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It's an off intersection in, we're not.
You've got it dashed in, right?
Yeah, dashed in. Right now it's not a crosswalk, but it's painted as a crosswalk. I have to run it by the neighborhood,
So
the residents.
if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of run through what I think were the possible changes we talked about to the traffic calming policy and make sure that coincides with what you're planning to write up. Is that okay?
Right.
So one idea is that the first response when someone contacts you would be that you would send information which would include a list of the different kinds of traffic calming that the city can do.
Yeah.
And then the next step for the resident would be to collect signatures from their neighbors to move ahead with a speed survey.
And that's a change from the existing policy because the existing policy is, so that's a change.
And then after you do the survey, based on the numbers in the survey, if they're very low, we would say do nothing. If they're medium, we would say we can do the striping options. And if they're high, we would say we can consider the hardscape options.
I think that we should.
If the residents so choose, or consider just the striping if that's what the residents prefer. Is that?
Well, no. I was thinking that in the ones that measure over 28 or at 28, then we can actually offer that. But I wouldn't offer anything else for the other ones because.
That's what I was trying to say. If the speed survey comes back low, we offer nothing.
Yeah.
If the speed survey comes back medium, we offer striping. And
But
if
when
the
I was-
speed
yeah.
survey comes back high, we offer a choice of striping or possibly straight.
And that will depend on our funding.
Depend on funding and also on the neighbor's willingness.
Yeah, because before I test, I said they already collected signatures agreeing to this, whatever.
But I guess what I'm hoping is that the people who are signing that first request for speed survey shouldn't necessarily be committing to saying that they support a speed bump if warranted.
Well, that's a big issue then.
Because I would hope that people would be comfortable signing, saying we want to pursue this, we want the survey done, we want striping, and then if there's a possibility of hardscape, we would go back into discussion to decide if that's what they want.
Right, but by signing the petition, they're acknowledging that there's a range of potential solutions that may be
Right,
recommended.
they're not agreeing to have a speed bump put in
No.
front of their house if you so choose. They're
But
they're
the
opening
si-
the door to further discussion about that if
Yeah.
warranted.
But the signing of the petition agrees that they believe there's a speed issue
If they believe there's an issue and
that needs to be investigated
Right.
and addressed.
And that they would like the striping solutions implemented if possible. Like, we don't have to go back to ask them again to do the striping. But if we decide that we want to do the speed bump, I would think we should offer them another chance to speak up.
Right, so the disclosure would be that, that at the discretion of the city, certain improvements may be made, but if it includes hard improvements like a speed hump, we'll come back and discuss.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. Is that agreeable?
Yeah, I think so.
If the survey comes back medium and we're going to do striping, does it need to come back to us? I would like it just to, okay, it's medium, it needs striping, go do it. Don't wait for us.
Yeah,
Is
I mean,
that-
I
fine
would,
with
I would
that.
like it if the staff is empowered to
Yeah.
Yeah.
go
do
ahead
it.
with that.
Okay, so the last one, I like empower. What did you say?
That if decisions are to be made about striping solutions, staff can make and implement those decisions without bringing it to.
Like I'm doing with 900 block of Pomona.
Okay.
Give a lady a spray paint can and watch her go.
Well,
Why not?
why not?
Yeah.
We just slow things down if you bring it to us.
Well,
I
yeah.
was doing it with the wheel, and some of the things go like, oh, no, erase. So I go,
Okay,
Silly time.
so we feel pretty good about,
yeah.
Yes, I feel,
But I'll bring back the policy.
yeah, that
To
sounds
you.
good. All right. So 10 minutes or so to do the Measure D? We do that?
And I included the matrix that you guys discussed at the last meeting. I was not present, so if you want to comment on that or give us an introduction, that would be great.
well, I'd just like to point out that we made some further changes at the meeting, so this is not the very latest
Yeah,
matrix
okay.
that will be presented to council, but it's pretty close.
So we have another meeting on the 30th, is that right? Okay, next. A comment? I'm sorry.
Well, it's just for information, so unless anyone's got anything to add, we can just. Potential grant application for the Caltrans Active Transportation, or ATP, call for projects.
Yes. I did have some, maybe I'm gonna, you guys, before you leave, pick one, then there are excerpts from the ATP and the Complete Streets. And I am now.
Is that what you sent us in email?
Yeah. You have.
Yeah, and it's on the agenda.
So what, well, the
So
thought is-
basically-
Yes,
No,
just go ahead.
To try to move quickly here, the potential action for us is recommend to council to adopt a resolution supporting the grant applications.
Yes.
These are consistent with policies that we've been trying to put in place,
Yeah.
so unless anyone's got any concerns, I'd say we just,
And you have reviewed it, but we're not going to implement the bicycle facilities on San Pablo Avenue, except the extension of the cycle track from the development, UC development, up to Marine.
Right.
I mean, San Pablo. And
You can.
and that's basically the only bicycle facility we will be implementing under this grant application. Mostly, we're going to do the intersection improvements on San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street, which is Taylor, and the merge, Buchanan Marine merge. We're going to create a pocket park, and also just to have some kind of gateway study. by the intersection. There is a picture there of a gateway with the big name Albany there. What would might consider that? So maybe another version of that, but that's hopefully it's going to give us money to study that.
Okay, that sounds good. So if anyone wants to make a motion that council adopt a resolution of support for the grant applications,
I so move.
okay.
Like, could you get it from that?
I second.
All in
Great.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks.
Unanimous, thank you all. So announcements and communications, the Arts and Green Festival, Sunday, May 4th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Bike to School Day, Wednesday, May 7th. Bike to Work Day, Thursday, May 8th.
Any other communications announcements?
May 17th, Albany Police Activities League Bicycle Rodeo, 10 to 1 at Cornell.
Good. All right. Comments on the future agenda items, 900 Polk Street traffic calming in May, also Santa Fe chicanes at Pomona and Ramona, Canes and Adams Bike Facility would be in June.
Whatever happened with the street painting? I know it's kind of gotten put way back, and I know you're really busy.
No,
But we're talking about calming. I think that's...
Okay, so it doesn't seem that the Arts Commission is getting around actually meeting one thing is that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I made a presentation to them early this year. They seem committed, but I just want to create a subcommittee and start looking at the existing policy that I think is the city of Portland has.
Well, we had one subcommittee meeting, and then nothing happened after that.
Who was the representative from the Arts Commission?
At that point, it was Susan Adame, who's no longer on the Arts Committee.
So I think that's what Liam told me, that he's having problems with finding another person. So I'll try to pursue that. I think one thing I wanted to actually, in the elegant measures of traffic calming, I think this should be one. You know, the street painting. I've been receiving a lot of requests from the Pomona residents and the Dartmouth residents. I think we should really move along. If one thing we can do is actually have a subcommittee and develop and look at the policy, develop a draft policy for Albany, run it through the Arts Commission, and then present it to council. I think that's the only way to move it forward. What do you think? We might not be reinventing the wheel. It's already done in Oregon.
Right. Well, I mean, we had a subcommittee, so and it was the two of us and two from the arts?
Yeah.
One, the only one.
So we kind of have started down that path. Maybe the next time I go to the arts committee, I can push them a little bit. It's like, go there all the time.
To let me know, maybe I can go and then I actually just drag one. Say, oh, you. Or we can just go do it ourselves, propose.
Is that what you just said? So a subcommittee of us?
Yeah.
So writing it up and then
yeah,
seeing if they'll...
Creating a draft and run it by them and say, this is for your consideration. Please comment on that. I mean, if the mountain doesn't come to me, I go to the mountain. That's basically. What do you think? I mean, you guys think it's a good approach? And that would be faster, actually. And if they complain, then we can actually, okay, let's form a subcommittee, let's digest this and dissect the whole thing and create a new document. But I think that it's going to start the wheel actually, rolling, turning.
And that'd be one more thing in the soft traffic calming toolbox.
Yep.
There you go.
Okay.
There were a couple of public comments that we may want to consider for future agenda.
Sure.
One was the 10-minute parking space at Cugini.
Yeah.
Is that the process for them?
There is a process. We have to notify the block on his side across the street, invite them to a meeting here. And the other thing is that I'm going to have to check the parking occupancy. And
Parking is
yeah.
highly occupied.
Yes.
And does he know that we've selected that as a space for disabled parking place?
He
Does
knows.
He know that?
Yeah, he doesn't have any problems with that. He knows that.
He just wants a space there that's a 10-minute pickup, doesn't have to be right in front of,
No, actually, he would love it in front of,
certainly be preferred, but I think we'll have to figure out where it makes sense to put it.
yeah.
we
There is the
also-
Wheels of Justice too, that he talked to the owner of Wheels of, and he thinks that the Wheels of Justice wouldn't mind.
Okay. We also would have to consider the hours of enforcement for that, because for picking up dinner at
Let's not talk about it.
6:10, yeah, we won't talk about it.
There's other issues with enforcing a 10-minute space anyway.
Yeah.
You can sign it, see what happens.
Yeah. And then there was a comment about the injury potential from the vertical metal seat, bike seat emblems.
Right, so the bike racks, yeah, the seat on them is not comfortable
The
to sit on.
simulated seat on the bike racks being possibly a danger to children. Is that?
I don't know.
think-
I don't want to comment on that.
Ridden the bike racks in the past and haven't managed to hurt themselves, but
It seems like perhaps we would need some evidence brought to us before we would agendize it, or?
Well, I was
I think
thinking of
so.
contacting the manufacturer and ask if they have heard of any kind of like,
Yeah,
risk or lawsuits or accident incidents that happen with their.
I think that's fine.
Thanks,
If you take a look into that and if you find anything that seems worth bringing it back to us, then maybe we can agendize it, but barring that. And then I know as far as the pedestrian collision and citations, we had received information from the police department that
Yeah.
they needed training in order to issue, particular training so that they could issue citations that they had not observed, but that they were kind of based on secondhand information or assessment of the situation, being able to issue citations. And I think that's something that just in hearing from the police department more on their ability to pursue that.
And they also said they were going to review their policy.
Yeah, so
And we
we're
asked for
kind of
them to
waiting.
come back
at this
to us
point.
on that,
So that's
yeah.
still pending.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel
Yep.
like we're asking for a new item there. That's already out there. So at some point, we expect that we'll hopefully hear more from the police department. So I don't see us agendizing that until we know what their position is.
Well, it would be really good just to keep it there, just to remind us.
Yeah. Yeah, just list it as a future item pending police department determination.
I think, I'm not sure exactly how to do this. I think we do want to keep track of Pierce Street Park and the flashing beacon. I know they didn't pull it out the other night, but it seemed like it was close, and I think we want to sort of be in front of that. If money gets really tight on that, we might want to agendize it and talk about it if it's necessary.
Yeah, because at the last council meeting, they said that it's one of the flashing aspect of the sign would be eliminated because of cost. And that's, so one thing I can do is follow up with the designer and, but I think we might have to opt to use as a measure B to fill the gap.
Yeah. There are a variety of different beacon types that I think at different price ranges do some cost savings, but still get something.
And flashing?
Yeah. And
Well,
whether they're push button activated or they're always on or which
Well,
type
I
of
think
beacon
this
they
is
are.
the always on. I think it's the
Yeah.
cheapest one.
Exactly. I mean, I think the last time I had priced something out like that was probably 6 years ago, but for $2,000 or $3,000, you could get a simple solar-powered beacon that sat on top of a stop sign pole or something that's already there.
Well, there is that. There's going to be the sign of pedestrian
Yeah.
crossing yield here, so that's the one that's going to have the.
Yeah. Exactly. The signs that have the integrated flashers in them may be more expensive. I haven't priced those out, but again, we could look at a round beacon sitting on top of one of those signs, a sign that has the integrated lights in it. Anyway, that's getting into details, but if there's something that we can do to assist with value engineering to try to keep that in scope, it sounds like there's an interest on our part to do that.
Okay,
So,
I'll send an email to Jeff and Penelope regarding your comments and your advice, your recommendation to keep the flashing beacon.
okay. So we seem to have covered everything. So unless there's any further comments, we're adjourned. Thank you all. Woohoo, just in time.